what America was and what it can become. This is Liberty Town Hall.
And welcome back to Liberty Town Hall. We're joined in studio today by Tom and Ken, and we're talking about public lands and patents, right? Copyright, or basically property rights on your lands, right?
Yes.
Yes. So can somebody tell me what public lands really are?
I think I can probably help you out on that a little bit.
All right.
But I am going to read this, so just so we get it right. And this comes from none other than modern law of real property. And it says that public lands of the United States are held by it, not as an ordinary individual proprietor, but in trust for all the people of all the states to pay debts and provide for the common defense and general welfare under the express terms of the Constitution. All land held by the government or an agency or instrumentality thereof is held either as a public trust or in a proprietary sense. Public trust lands cannot be alienated as can that held by a proprietorship.
So what does that really mean? let's get real. So, okay, we got the dictionary definition now. So what does that really mean?
That means that when the federal government ceded, or the state ceded...
Federal or state here? So
when the states became a state,
okay,
and all the land within the exterior boundaries of the state of Michigan were ceded to the federal government, that meant that the government owned that property in trust for all of us.
Wait, the whole
not for
state.
them.
So there's no
state.
private land at this point in time at all?
We'll say there is no private land within the state of Michigan.
Okay, so the state's formed, and it's all public land at this point, right?
It's all public land except that was originally in the bottom part of the state where people had already started to settle.
Like homesteading and whatnot?
Absolutely. Then that
so they had their land before the state was formed, so how does their property rights come into play?
Their property rights stand upon the execution of the patent when we were still a territory on the Northwest.
So now you have to have a patent,
Ordinance.
not a deed.
Yeah, well, the patent is when you purchase from a governmental entity, whether it be a state government or a federal government. Now, given Michigan was a public land state under the federal government's ownership and trust, when you settled in the lower part of the state where the most settlements started, Detroit, and moved west along the Grand River, you would go to the federal government, you would purchase your land from the federal government, they'd execute the patent to you and your heirs and assigns. Now that executed before the state became official in January.
There's a way to transfer from one to the states now. So how do we do that? How do we transfer?
Well, that occurred, the transfer
before a state to after a state?
Well, the Constitution was formed in 1835. It took us 18 months to become a state, a federal state in a more perfect union, and on equal footing. When we became a state, there were still unsold lands owned by the federal government within our exterior boundaries.
So within
those
the
lands,
state, they were still owned by the federal government,
correct,
even though we already become a state.
Correct.
So these lands never were part of the state of Michigan then?
No, they were simply owned by the federal government within our state, as opposed to being owned by individual property owners or the state government itself.
So what did the state end up with in this then?
Well, the state had to have, before they could get rid of any property or the federal government could get rid of any of the public land or the land in trust to the federal government, it had to be surveyed. There were field notes, and that's why we have townships with sections, ranges, and 36 square miles, because that's how they started at a meridian. Once that was done, once that was completed, then the federal government, through its land offices, could then sell a portion, whatever portion, give away, whatever they wanted to do. And that was done via a land patent. And once that patent was issued from the land office, then it became the absolute deed, and
so the patent was turned into a deed at that point.
It was the patent is the absolute deed. If you want to use the word, it's the patent, but it becomes the absolute deed to the individual who purchased that property, or who homesteaded that property, or who got that property through a Swamplands Act, or a Homestead Act, or was in the War of 1812 and was promised land for his pay for serving in our military.
Ken, why does this matter? What difference does it make? I mean, everybody's sitting there asking, who cares? This was so old ago. What difference does it make today?
Well, the history and the law is linear. It's a straight line from point A to today, which we'll call point B. And the land patent was the devolution of the ownership of government to the private ownership of, let's say, myself.
So you're trying to say that when one of these patents or deed, for lack of a better word that people would understand, would be, now it's my land, not the government land.
Correct.
So what does that mean for me?
Well, then...
I mean, the government can still come in, take my property, do all
No,
these
the
things.
limitations of constitutions then kick in once you're a private citizen on your land.
Well, trust me, if you don't pay your property tax every year, they're going to take it. They're going to auction it.
The founding fathers understood that dilemma. And prior to the republic being formed, the envy of land grabs was done by direct taxation in the local shire, the local province. When the founding fathers met in Philadelphia in 1787 to amend the Articles of Confederation and Perpetual Union, they wanted to give the government limitations and also a monetary authority, a physical authority, a tax authority. But they also wanted to limit at the same time state taxing authority. So the agreement was direct taxes were ceded by all states to the federal government, which is in Article 2 of the, Article 1, Section 2 of the Federal Constitution, a direct tax. A direct tax is when they reach out and tax the state by federal legislation. And that's how direct taxes work. They touch the exterior boundaries of the state. Then the state may turn around at its option and use the authority of the federal statute to tax land.
We'll be right back as we get into why this is so important against weighing against your property tax. Do you own your property or not? And we'll be right back with more Liberty Town Hall.
The new Miracle Blade World Class 2012 Professional Series is the best set of knives you'll ever own. The spectacular World Class 2012 Series, over a $300 value for just $39.95. But we're just getting started. We'll send you a complete second set of Miracle Blades for free. That's right, another entire set, a $300 value for free. Just pay shipping and processing. And we're still not done. If you're one of the first 500 callers, we'll send you 2 additional Miracle Blade World Class Slicers. That's an additional $80 value, totally free. Miracle Blade World Class is also guaranteed for life. We'll replace any damaged knife at any time for any reason for free forever. Over $600 worth of knives for just one payment of $39.95. Don't miss this opportunity. Call right now or just log on to miracleblade.com.
And thank you for staying with us. We're joined here with Ken and Tom, and we're discussing who owns your land. Federal government, state government, or do you own your land? How do we get this answer? I mean, in the last segment, we talked about this lineage of the state being formed and how you had your patent, aka deed to the property, issued by the federal government, and then the state come into play, for example, in Michigan here, and then what? That's where we left off, right? So how do we get a clear title to the land?
You have to understand the importance of 2 constitutions. The federal constitution and the state constitution.
Are they in conflict here?
No,
or
they're in sync.
Are these in the same with all the states?
All the states have to be in sync because to join the union by the Enabling Act of 1836 in June for Michigan, the state had to have a constitution which formed a Republican form of government, which we do have today, and had to have limitations and authorities that did not conflict, as you stated, with the federal constitution. And when the founding fathers fought and established a republic, they wanted to limit the reach of government at all levels. And at the state level, they wanted to limit taxation
Okay.
to basically ad valorem taxes, excises, privilege taxes. They authorized, by constitutional authorization in Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3, direct taxation to the federal legislature only. Only the federal legislature can directly touch your land, but only upon a legislative enactment at Congress. Then the legislative enactment only touches the state boundaries.
I'm sorry, I'm confused here, because if only the federal government can tax your land,
Correct.
then how come everybody pays state tax on their land? And
Well, we're
county
dealing
and township taxes.
with a systemic fraud. It's simple as that. You're dealing with historical wrongs becoming a contemporaneous right. You're dealing with a lack of knowledge, a lack of understanding. You're dealing with, when you talk to a party in state in an official capacity. Let's just say
I just find it hard to believe that after all these years, you guys are standing up saying the state doesn't have a right to tax your land because of how the constitutions were worded and who had direct taxation power versus who didn't. This is really what it comes down to.
Correct.
Who actually controlled your land before you got it, and what happened with the constitutions when they were formed at the federal and state level?
Well, the federal government had all control of all ceded land to the federal government until such time.
Well, this was the Northwest Territory.
Correct.
So that was a federal land grab, essentially, right?
Well, no, it came from Virginia because Virginia had, as part of,
Virginia had the whole
Northwest
Northwest
Territory.
So Virginia could have been the biggest state in the union at this point.
Yeah, and when Virginia became a state, it ceded to the federal government the whole Northwest Territory.
Okay.
Therefore, giving all control to the Congress of the United States. And only the Congress, through its acts, could it cede or sell or patent any land to anybody who wanted to buy it. And again, that was so that they could take care of the government bills at $1.25 an acre at that time.
Okay, but wait a minute. If the state can't charge tax, I mean, if on your land, if they're not allowed to do that, then wouldn't the federal government just say, fine, it's a federal charge and this is how it works?
No.
I mean, what's the
no,
difference?
The
Because
state-
I doubt they're going to give up their property tax. I mean, somebody's going to change the rules. If you found a loophole in this, somebody's going to change the rules because they're not about ready to change their own taxes.
It's not a loophole. It's a constitutional limitation upon the state. It's written clearly in Article 9, Section 5 of the Michigan State Constitution.
And every state violates this.
We know Michigan does. I won't speak for the other 49. I don't live there. But generally...
Well, I'm pretty much betting that everybody's got property tax somewhere. When
There
I was in Colorado, I paid them.
Yeah, but again, they're wrong. It's simply an improper use of governmental authority. And it's very difficult. Now, the state does have a right to tax certain specified lands that arise within their jurisdiction.
But those would be the public lands.
They would be lands where if you were forming a corporation entity under state grant.
So if a corporation bought a piece of property,
Correct.
they could tax that.
Correct. If you read the 1850...
No, they don't tax the
land.
They tax the corporation as being a privilege
Right, but
taken
that's just
from the
corporate
state.
tax and they can
That's
label it
corporate
anything
That's
they
an
want.
ad valorem tax.
So
It's-
the actual land tax itself, the property tax. I know, for example, here that most of our school funding comes from our property tax.
That's what they tell you. What was it,
Well-
range 16 in the Northwest Ordinance for the trust for the tax for the schools?
I'm sorry, what?
Yeah, Section 16.
Section 16.
of
School- yeah,
every
right.
township was for
The schools.
and allotted under congressional act
Right.
for schools.
When I grew up, we had School Section Lake.
Right.
It was a lake, they made a
Right.
park there, and I know we raised money at at School Section Lake for the schools. I do know that.
Land is the foundation of your right, period.
Okay.
If you have no rights in your land, you have no rights. This is what the constitutions do at the state and federal level. That's why direct taxation is applicable only to the land you stand on. And when the last direct tax was enacted in 1861 in August, the authority to collect the tax in the states not in rebellion, which is everything north of the Mason-Dixon line, was turned under the authority of state law. Now in Michigan, the state legislature passed a resolution and directed the Treasury to first have the federal government give credit for the mobilization of the state militia into federal service. They wanted a credit to the $550,000 of 1861 direct taxes. Then the balance was going to be assessed on all landowners, property owners, and it would be assessed according to your enumeration, i.e. evaluation. The equalization is where it came into play. That was the last direct tax. They amended in 1862, and that was it. They haven't had a direct tax since. But as my wife says, when they kept sending out the bills, the people kept sending in the money, bonanza. And this is your historical wrong.
We'll be right back with more Liberty Town Halls. We get into who owns the property and what taxes should be paid on it. We'll be right back.
Are you behind on your mortgage payments? Could your house go into foreclosure? Does it seem like the bank has no interest in helping you save your home and you feel like you have nowhere to turn? Then we have good news for you. American Foreclosure Service. American Foreclosure Service can help save your home. We specialize in foreclosure assistance, and that's all we do. If you're behind on your mortgage payments, being threatened with foreclosure, have been denied a loan modification, or been the victim of a predatory loan, it's critical that you call American Foreclosure Service now. American Foreclosure Service has a network of attorneys, and our agents are available to speak to you now. Remember, if you're behind on your mortgage payments, American Foreclosure Service can help stop the foreclosure process. Call today before it's too late. New laws are in effect that may save your home. So call American Foreclosure Service now.
Call 1-800-541-7739 now.
And thank you for joining us. We're finishing up today with Ken Thompson and Tom Dunn. And we're talking about jurisdiction. Who really has jurisdiction over your land? The state, the local, or the federal government? Guys, can you tell me about the Frostbite Convention? I hear about this, but they didn't teach me this in school, so I'm missing it. So
well, the Frostbite Convention is when Michigan state citizens stood up to join the Union. In June, to make it short, in June of 1836, the state legislature meeting in Detroit would not concede the Toledo Strip. Which
right, there was a strip down there,
right,
yes, between Indiana and
Toledo,
yeah.
the Maumee River, mouth of the Maumee River. And we wanted to join the Union. Our
right.
progeny, our forefathers wanted to join the Union. So they said, well, if the state legislature refused to accede to the will of the people, since the legislature sits at the will of the people, we'll sit a new convention. So they had an election in September of 1836 and elected a convention of delegates who sat in Ann Arbor on December 14th and 15th, the Frostbite Convention. And they accepted at that point the Enabling Act of June of 1836, which established the Toledo Cession and gave us the Upper Peninsula. That's the essence of the Frostbite.
Trade. That's when the trade.
Correct.
The Frostbite Convention was when we made that trade.
Acknowledged
for the strip of Ohio for the UP.
Correct.
Gotcha.
And then that gave us the ability to send our papers to Congress, and we joined the Union officially by congressional enactment and presidential signature on January 26th of 1837. And the interesting point of this is it was the state citizens in Michigan who stood upon the land who asserted their rights to limit government's arrogance. And this is the history of our state, which unfortunately is not shared very often. And government wants to be the omnipotent presence. And that's what we're dealing with today. And they're able to enable this thought process through, censoring history.
That's the educational situation that we fall in today, where our history teachers, our schools, are really not teaching the history of our state, which I hated history when I was in school. Just couldn't stand it.
Right.
But love it today. And it goes back to the fact that it is not the function of our government to keep the citizens from falling. It must be the citizens that have to keep the government from falling into error. And that's what we have to learn. It's education, and history. That's what puts us.
Well, we did a segment on change the word, change the world. changing the meaning of a word.
Correct.
Well, when we forget about the history and reasons for these things being done, in a very real way, we've changed our rights in the flow of everything in the process.
Well, what they do, they being the ones who put this omnipotent era on us, is they do use words. And they take the format of words, and words become the symbol of the act. And the symbol is what they rely upon. And we see that in 30-second commercial bites for this presidential campaign wherein they're showing symbols. They're not showing form and substance.
Well, this is going to be a really complicated issue for people to get their minds around. Will you guys come back and join us again, and we'll continue on with what liabilities do you have for your ownership of your land now? And I'd really like to get that broke down. Is there a way they can get a hold of you guys?
Yes, they can get a hold of us and send us an email at landandlibertytownhall@gmail.com.
All spelled out. Land, just Land Liberty, or
Land and Liberty.
Okay.
Townhall@gmail.com.
At gmail.com. Well, guys, thank you very much for being here today, and I can't wait to get into the next segment of this trilogy we're going to have on this issue. Thank you again. We'll be right back with more Liberty Town Hall.
Tired of faded bumpers, foggy headlights, weathered, sun-damaged vehicles? Introducing Wipe New, the world's longest-lasting solution for restoring and protecting your vehicle. And we guarantee it to last for years. We applied Wipe New to the driver's side of this vehicle. We then sent this car through over 100 powerful car washes. Wipe New never faded or washed away, proving that the results will last for years of real-world environmental exposure.
I don't think I ever seen it, Brando. I got it about 2 years old, and I've never seen it shine like this.
Don't spend a fortune on temporary fixes. Order now and we'll double the size. That's enough for 2 cars. There's still more. Order now and get the Pro Detailing Kit with the headlight applicator bonus. Just pay separate shipping and processing. Order now and get it all, plus a 2-year guarantee.
To get your Wipe New detailing kit, call 1-800-481-5617. Wipe New comes with a 2-year money-back guarantee and is not available in stores, so call 1-800-481-5617 today.
Well, gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us here today. I certainly appreciate it. So you
welcome.
will come back.
Yes,
and
by all
we're going to
means.
get into this some more. You wait. And that's all for today. Thank you again for joining us here on Liberty Town Hall.
If men through fear, fraud, or mistake should in terms renounce and give up any essential natural right, the eternal law of reason and the great end of society would absolutely vacate such renunciation. The right of freedom being the gift of God Almighty. It is not in the power of man to alienate this gift and voluntarily become a slave. Rights of the Colonists by John Adams, 1772.